How are the beaches looking after another day's clean-up?
The beaches are looking very good, and one of our key concern areas was the entrainment of oil within the sand column. We've done quite a bit of extensive surveying of the beaches from Makatu through to Mount Maunganui, the 30-kilometre stretch there, and we're finding very little entrainment, if any. So that's a real positive sign. The geomorphology of the beach isn't changing significantly to actually entrap that oil within the sand column.
So are there some sections that are essentially good to go, but you're just holding fire until you've done your checks tonight? Is that sort of the way it is?
Thank you. And the best way to describe it is we've got containers still washing ashore. So we're still aware of the fact that containers are on the surf zone around the Papamoa area, and we're recovering those containers ashore as well. As far as the oil cleanup goes, we're around the 90% mark in terms of oil cleanup. What we've got now are mainly the rocky outcrops around Leisure Island and Mount Maunganui to work through and clean up.
How long, you showed us a slide of the sort of natural dispersion process. How long...
Should we go back to it?
Oh. I was just going to say, how long does it take to completely sort of break up and no longer be a threat to marine life or anything like that?
Depends on many things. Once the oil starts emulsifying, and once the oil takes on a body of water to help that weathering and emulsification process, then it becomes more stable. However, it's a body of oil that still needs recovery. How long depends on water temperature, salinity, ambient temperatures, many different environmental factors come into play here.
So could it be a couple of weeks and it's no longer a threat, or...?
It's an interesting question, and I can't make any prediction. I would look at weeks and months process. This oil isn't crude oil. This is a distilled product, which is probably at the bottom end of the crude pile, so it's a different constituency than the crude oils that we sometimes come against.
Nick, I understand you've had some scientists over the past few days working up and down, testing the sand column, the depth that oil may have penetrated to, I guess, underneath. What's like the deepest, in the sand column that you found the oil beneath there? And
we found 2 millimetres of oil trapped about 20 centimetres sand depth in some places. That was mainly around the heavier areas of Papamoa, and I'd suggest that's where the main weathering or the oil actually landed itself before it came under different tidal type influences. So I think probably we saw some sand turning over around the low water mark as well.
So that presumably is oil that hasn't been cleared and then sand's come over the top of it?
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
Whakatane Forward Command, you're calling it. Can you describe that? They're saying, 50 people there, so why such a big presence?
We want to, if there's another release of oil and we're looking at a northerly influence, then we're potentially looking at the oil going on Papamoa Beach. But we are also quite concerned that if it does go down and suffer an influence which takes it down south of Makatu, then we really need a command post to actually handle and manage that. So while we've got 50 people in a command post, a lot of those are also ready to actually go out and deploy equipment, support logistics and support an operation there.
So your presentation tends to imply that you're going to get a few paddies but not much.
And I'll make a difference between the oil that's currently out in the environment and oil that we think is still entrapped within the ship. And if the ship does move, then that's a new release of oil to us. So there is a difference, and back to the weathering question before, there is a difference between what's currently out there and the length of time that's been out there. And if we can flick back a couple of slides, we'll have a look at that sort of stuff occurring to fresh oil releases, which is sheen, but also black persistent oil, which tends to stick together and just travel down in a mass.
That graphic you just showed us, is that stuff that's already out there?
Yes.
Right. So if more was to be released tonight in the wind and the sea we've been told about, that's a different scenario.
It is, and we run a different model for that, but the anticipation is would land where it landed the other night with the nor'easters and northerlies blowing it down onto Papamoa Beach, but the Whakatane forward operating base is there in case the oil tracks further south as well.
How many containers are still floating around?
We have approximately 88 containers that have fallen off the ship that we know have fallen off the ship. We've recovered, or we know the existence of around 45 of them, So the rest of them we are presumed have submerged. This is an area that the salvage company will be looking at, and they need to get some pretty intensive sonar equipment sweeping up and down the seabed just to locate those containers.
Right, but in terms of ones on the surface, that would cause problems for boats and in the shipping channels, that sort of thing?
We're accounting for those and tracking for those. We reckon we can find about 25 to 30 of them.
Still out there now?
Yeah.
Just getting back to that model with the oil distribution, there was a figure where the oil was actually off Laughlin's Point. You say when that would actually arrive at that point then?
Sorry, other way. We just link your question to the model if we can. Okay, can we run that model, please? Down in the bottom left-hand corner, you can see a timeline running, and for the sake of saying my eyesight isn't that good, I think we're up to about day 2, day 3-ish, day 4, day 5, day 6, day 6.
Day 6, so
That's yesterday was day 1. So that's
Sorry, this is from running this model today, so yeah. So again, running the model from yesterday.
so we're probably looking about Saturday.
Potentially with that current oil movement, yeah. And remember, this is a model which is a predictive model only, so this is indicative only. I would still anticipate some of that oil stranding ashore, but noting it's travelling in a bit of a clump together and has been broken up, that indicates it's gone through a bit of weathering process and has emulsification happening to it.
there and then you.
And we heard quite a lot about the effects the oil's having on the wildlife down at Makito that way. What kind of special habitats or anything are further down that coast that you're worried about?
There are a couple of estuaries down the coast, I think, that we're a little bit concerned about. And of course, in the estuaries, as I said before, are the seagrasses and the mangroves. So they're the more sensitive communities around the area and the sites. And what we want to do is try and keep the oil more around the sandy areas where it's easier to collect rather than the muddy areas where it's actually quite difficult to collect.
I just wanted to double check 88 containers for ship.
That's the count I have, yes.
And the counts, there were 1,315 containers on the list. 1368, so there's.
Nick, are you able to give us an idea of what kind of chop or swell you're expecting in the winter terms?
It's an interesting question. With a northerly of 25 to 30 knots, you tend to get a chop or slop of around a metre to a metre and a half. You add that to the residual swell, and I think we've got about a metre of residual swell coming through at the moment. So you could have peak heights of metre and a half to 2 metres worth of swell, and that's the open sea, that's the fetch coming down from the open sea. So that's the influence that the potential oil at sea will be under.
Last question over here.
Yes, thank you. I've had some reports coming in of oiled seals on Motiti Island, and I was wondering if there was any effort being made there, or the question coming to us is, where are the seals? No one can see them, and then we've received some photographs of some that are covered in oil. Do you know anything about that?
No, I don't. What I know is that there's not a lot of oil on the water around Motiti at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
The oil that's out there is mainly sheen, and the mortality within the wildlife community has significantly dropped. So with that, I think it's safe to assume that the wildlife community is not heavily being impacted with oil now. It was about 4 or 5 days ago, and that's why we started to see the mass mortality and the mortality count really rise quickly.
Okay. One last question, then we'll wrap it up.
So could you just recap again the process about what happens to the oil once it's taken away with go?
When we collect the oil off the beach, we take it through a waste process, and that waste process is then collected by a firm that we have identified to remove the oil across to Hamilton Downs.